All right, good morning. We're here on 6/30/2021 to read approximately 10 minutes a day from the Anarchist Handbook, organized by Michael Malice. And we are going to wrap up Lysander Spooner today from his 1870 work about the Constitution in the United States. So we're starting on the bottom, about two-thirds of the way down, page 125, and we're going to go ahead and read right through. May have time to continue on to our next author, essayist, but we shall see. Here we go. The whole affair, on the part of those who furnish the money, has been and now is a deliberate scheme of robbery and murder, not merely to monopolize the markets of the South, but also to monopolize the currency, and thus control the industry and trade, and thus plunder and enslave the laborers of both North and South. And Congress and the President are today the merest tools for these purposes. They are obliged to be, for they know that their own power as rulers, so-called, is at an end, the moment their credit with the blood money loanmonger fails. They are like a bankrupt in the hands of an extortioner. They dare not say nay to any demand made upon them, and to hide at once, if possible, both their servility and their crimes. They attempt to divert public attention by crying out that they have, quote, abolished slavery, that they have, quote, saved the country, that they have, quote, preserved the Union, preserved our glorious Union, and that in now paying the, quote, national debt, as they call it, as if the people themselves, all of whom are to be taxed for its payment, had really and voluntarily joined in contracting it. They are simply maintaining the national honor. By maintaining the national honor, they mean simply that they themselves, open robbers and murderers, assume to be the nation, and will keep faith with those who lend them the money necessary to enable them to crush the great body of the people under their feet. And will faithfully appropriate from the proceeds of their future robberies and murders enough to pay all their loans, principal and interest. The pretense that the, quote, abolition of slavery was either a motive or justification for the war is a fraud of the same character with that of, quote, maintaining the national honor. Who, but such usurpers, robbers, and murderers as they, ever established slavery? Or what government, except one resting upon the sword, like the one we have now, was ever capable of maintaining slavery? And why did these men abolish slavery? Not from any love of liberty in general, not as an act of justice to the black man himself, but only, quote, as a war measure. And because they wanted his assistance and that of his friends in carrying on the war they had undertaken for maintaining and intensifying that political, commercial, and industrial slavery to which they have subjected the great body of people, both white and black. And yet these impostors now cry out that they have abolished the chattel slavery of the black man, although that was not the motive of the war, as if they thought they could thereby conceal, atone for, or justify that other slavery which they were fighting to perpetuate and to render more rigorous and inexorable than it ever was before. There was no difference of principle, but only of degree, between the slavery they boast they have abolished and the slavery they were fighting to preserve. For all the restraints upon men's natural liberty, not necessary for the simple maintenance of justice, are of the nature of slavery, and differ from each other only in degree. If their object had really been to abolish slavery, or maintain liberty or justice generally, they had only to say, all, whether white or black, who want the protection of this government shall have it, and all who do not want it will be left in peace, so long as they leave us in peace. Had they said this, slavery would necessarily have been abolished at once. The war would have been saved, and 1,000 times nobler union than we have ever had would have been the result. It would have been a voluntary union of free men, such a union as will one day exist among all men the world over, if the several nations, so-called, shall ever get rid of the usurpers, robbers, and murderers called governments, that now plunder, enslave, and destroy them. Still another of the frauds of these men is that they are now establishing, and that the war was designed to establish, quote, a government of consent. The only idea they have ever manifested as to what is a government of consent is this, that it is one to which everybody must consent or be shot. This idea was the dominant one on which the war was carried on, and it is the dominant one now that we have got what is called, quote, peace. Their pretenses that they have, quote, saved the country and, quote, preserved our glorious union are frauds like all the rest of their pretenses. By them they mean simply that they have subjugated and maintained their power over an unwilling people. This they call saving the country, as if an enslaved and subjugated people, or as if any people kept in subjection by the sword, as is intended that all of us shall be hereafter, could be said to have any country. This too they call preserving our glorious union. As if there could be said to be any union, glorious or inglorious, that was not voluntary. Or as if there could be said to be any union between masters and slaves, between those who conquer and those who are subjugated. All these cries of having abolished slavery, or having saved the country, of having preserved the union, of establishing a government of consent, and of maintaining the national honor, are all gross, shameless, transparent cheats. So transparent that they ought to deceive no one, when uttered as justifications for the war, or for the government that has succeeded the war, or for now compelling the people to pay the cost of the war, or for compelling anybody to support a government that he does not want. The lesson taught by all these facts is this: as long as mankind continues to pay national debts, so-called, that is, so long as they are such dupes and cowards as to pay for being cheated, plundered, enslaved, and murdered, so long there will be enough to lend the money for those purposes, and with that money a plenty of tools, called soldiers, can be hired to keep them in subjection. But when they refuse any longer to pay for being thus cheated, plundered, enslaved, and murdered, they will cease to have cheats, and usurpers, and robbers, and murderers, and blood money loanmongers for masters. Appendix. Inasmuch as the Constitution was never signed nor agreed to by anybody as a contract, and therefore never bound anybody, and is now binding upon nobody, and is, moreover, such an one as no people can ever hereafter be expected to consent to, except as they may be forced to do so at the point of the bayonet, it is perhaps of no importance what its true legal meaning as a contract is. Nevertheless, the writer thinks it proper to say that, in his opinion, the Constitution is no such instrument as it has generally been assumed to be, but that by false interpretations and naked usurpations, the government has been made in practice a very widely and almost wholly different thing from what the Constitution itself purports to authorize. He has heretofore written much, and could write much more, to prove that such is the truth. But whether the Constitution really be one thing or another, this much is certain, that it has either authorized such a government as we have had, or has been powerless to prevent it. In either case, it is unfit to exist. And that is the end of Lysander Spooner. Phenomenal piece of work, ending on the bottom of page 128. And we'll just go ahead and stop right there. And our next step will be moving into Chapter 9, Johann Most, from The Science of Revolutionary Warfare, a little handbook of instruction in the use and preparation of nitroglycerin, dynamite, gun cotton, fulminating mercury, bombs, fuses, poisons, etc., from 1883. So, looks like we got a little bit of excitement coming up ahead. Until then.